My first graphic card was the Gigabyte GTX 1050 Ti Mini. After that, my second Gigabyte card was the GTX 1070 Mini, and the third one was the RTX 2070 Mini. However, Gigabyte decided to skip the 3000 series, and I had to buy the MSI RTX 3060 Ti Aero ITX. But today, Gigabyte returned to the mini game with the RTX 4000 series. Specifically, we have the RTX 4060 low profile. I have seen the 50 cards made in low profile, but this 4060 is probably the first low profile 60 card, which tells me how unimpressive, powerless, and shitty the 4060 is. Here's a quick unboxing. For some reason, the seal tape Gigabyte uses is very sticky and strong. And here it is, the current smallest RTX 4060. I gotta say, it looks so cute, especially with the 3 small fans. And being a low profile card, we can also find a low profile bracket in the box along with the quick start guide. So the first thing I did was removing the stock bracket and put on the low profile one. There are 4 screws which need removing. And while we are here, the card has 2 display ports and 2 HDMI ports. If you change the bracket, you will notice that there is one screw which is different from the rest. Now we can install the low profile bracket by putting the 4 screws back. From this angle, and with the 3 fans, the GPU looks like a full-size card with a very huge PCIe connector. It is so cute! Here is the 2 important specs I got from Gigabyte's website. The card's core clock speed is 2475 MHz, the length is 182mm, which is 10mm longer than the MSI RTX 3060 Ti Aero ITX. Moreover, the 8-pin power cable needs plugging from the front, so we may need to add a few millimeters to the length of the card, which causes this card incompatible with some cases. The card does not have a backplate, which makes it look ugly if you can only see its back once installed. I mentioned that because the Asus GTX 1650 low profile does have one. This RTX 4060 costs $330, so why not have a cheap piece of plastic backplate for it? The heatsink has one heat pipe running parallel along the card, so avoiding installing the GPU with its I/O upward keeps the temperature optimized. Before installing, here is the smallest RTX 4060 next to my Asus TUF RTX 3090. Imagine putting this 4060 next to a full-size RTX 4090. It would look super tiny. Now it's time to test the card on my test bench. The RTX 4060 will be paired with my i9 12900K and 32 gigs of 3600 MHz DDR4 memory. Like I already mentioned, if you have stiff power supply cables, the length of the card will increase significantly once the GPU cable is plugged in. The card does not have passive fan curve, which means the 3 fans run all the time, even during idle. This is understandable as the heatsink is small and has only one heat pipe. For the first game, let's check Red Dead Redemption 2. Sadly, I still haven't finished the game yet as I don't want it to end. Anyway, I kept the default graphics settings for this. I only turned off triple buffering, TAA, and motion blur. NVIDIA DLSS and AMD FSR are not on, but we have the game run at 70 plus FPS at 1440p, and I was impressed. I used to play this game on my GTX 1080 Ti, and I had to turn on triple buffering to keep the FPS above 60 at 1080p. Without using any upscaling cheat, the card performs great. But I am more impressed that Arthur can sit his butt down without a chair.
So, you save the silly bastard's life, then you and him go robbing sheep.
He's a grown man, Abigail. At least he looks like one.
He's a goddamn father.
He's got a child. He ain't no father.
I'm just begging you not to get him killed.
The next game is Hogwarts Legacy. I played this game a while ago but could not complete it as it was getting boring for me. Anyway, I kept all the graphic settings at high, ray tracing, reflection, and shadow are on. Of course, I had to turn DLSS on at balance to keep the game run above 60 FPS. With these settings, the game looks pretty, but I can definitely see the blurriness due to upscaling. Counter-Strike 2, the game has such a rushed launch, and it makes me feel like I am playing an unfinished product. I kept all the settings at high and the game runs smoothly at 1440p 400 fps in the map easily. From what I learned so far, CS2 is more GPU dependent while CSGO was more CPU dependent. So if you have been playing CSGO on an older graphic card, the RTX 4060 would be a nice upgrade for this eSport ready title. And here is my graphic settings for the game. I have not retried the new Witcher 3 as the graphic is just brutal to run on my RTX 3090. To have this run at 60 plus FPS on the RTX 4060, I enabled RTX reflection and shadow. The DLSS quality is set to ultra performance. Sharpening is set to high to keep the game from being too blurry. The rest of the settings are kept at high. Only grass density and detail level are set at ultra. It does indeed look nice and the FPS is good enough to play, but if we pay attention to the armor, whenever I move the camera, you can see the texture get fuzzy. If I go back to the settings and change DLSS quality to performance, the game dropped to 50 FPS, but now the texture of the armor look much better. To get a better looking game, we may need to sacrifice at least 10 to 15 FPS. Worth it? I don't know. I finished Cyberpunk 2077 2 years ago, but with the new DLC came out, it is definitely a good time to get back. As you can see, I am running the game around 60 FPS at 1440p, but it needs some tweaking in the settings to get that, so let's have a look. First, we take advantage of frame generation, which is available on the 4000 cards. DLSS is set to quality, and I increase the sharpness to reduce blurriness of upscaling. In the advanced section, all settings are cranked to high. In the ray tracing section, reflection and shadows are on, and ray trace lighting is set to ultra. Of course, it is not perfect, as if we zoom closer to some ad panels, the texts are not really clear. They are readable, but you can see the blurriness. When entering some busy areas, the FPS could drop to around 50 plus, and so far, that is the lowest it dropped to. Similar to The Witcher 3, 1440p 50 FPS with this game is playable. So, you have seen how this card handles some AAA ray tracing games at 1440p. Let's take a look at the clock speed and temperature. The card's effective clock speed is around 2700 MHz and the hotspot temperature is pretty high. If we look at Hardware Info 64, you can see the GPU temp is around 75 degrees and the hotspot reach up to 93 degrees on my open air test bench, which is very high. You can also see the fan speed is at 3800 to 4000 RPM. We can lower these values by setting a power limit on the card. I set my card at 90% power, which dropped the GPU power usage from 115 watts to around 105 watts. Of course, this would also lower the effective clock speed to 2500 MHz, but I did not notice any change in performance as the frame rate remained the same. And going back to Hardware Info 64, you can see the GPU temp is lower by 5 to 6 degrees and the hotspot is down by 10 degrees. Fan speed is also reduced by a few hundred RPM, which makes things noticeably quieter. we are now reaching the end of this review, and I just want to say that this is not a review of the RTX 4060. This is the review of the tiny Gigabyte 4060, because I would never recommend anyone to buy an RTX 4060 due to performance. You can grab a used RTX 3060 Ti or 3070 on eBay for much cheaper, and they can offer the same or better performance, minus frame generation. But if you want a cute miniature card which is also powerful, sure, as I think this would be one of the rare cards in the market. And if you plan to install in an SFX case, please make sure to check out the length of the case to ensure this card fits. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.